Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and it's time for another Breakfast with Blaha, and today I'm having fat-free Greek yogurt, almond butter, and milled flax seeds. All right, today I'm going to talk about a little bit more of an advanced topic. So the novice lifters out there, you don't need to know all this. Run your novice programs. Okay? When I cover these advanced topics, that doesn't mean that you do what I say in these videos and drop a novice linear program when you bench 135 for 5 reps. Unless you're a girl, and that's pretty good. Okay, don't do it. Because novices have unique needs on movement patterns. Novices need to actually spend quite a bit of time practicing basic movements over and over and over so they can learn how to move. And they have to ingrain those movement patterns. A lot of that goes away as you get more advanced because you're used to doing a lot of movement patterns. You've maintained a lot of these things, you know them, they're like riding a bike. You know, once you learn it, you can't unlearn it, or it's there. The novice needs to learn these things. But let's talk about gains from rotating exercises. Because that's something that comes up and people will say, well, you're changing lifts every week, every 2 weeks, every 3 weeks, your supplemental work. How do you maintain the muscle growth from them? And what people aren't factoring in is a couple of things. Number one, you're still training the muscles, right? With new training stimulus on top of that, with fresh stimulus. It's not like the muscles aren't getting a growth response, okay? Number two, it takes less work to maintain a muscle than it does to build it. Way less volume. And here's something to think about. When you work a muscle, what happens? The whole muscle gets worked. Not evenly. This is why one of the reasons a novel training response allows sometimes for some quicker progression. There's a movement pattern difference, which lets us get progressive overload quick, but we grow from the first workout, and we can usually increase weight really quick on a second workout. Okay? It's one of the big perks, one of the reasons we get good muscle growth from a newer training stimulus. But we grow from the first one, even if the movement pattern is detrained. Right? So because the whole muscle is still being worked, you are maintaining previously built muscle from other exercises in there, even if those heads of the muscle don't get worked the same. What do we mean? Tricep. Let's say you've been doing an exercise that works the long head a lot, and you switch to a movement that works the lateral medial head more but the long head less. Long head's not just necessarily going to shrink because you're still giving the long head enough volume to maintain it. Okay? Still getting maintenance volume, because the maintenance volume is something like a 1/6 to an 1/8 of what it takes to grow a muscle. Well, it's still getting that for sure. Right? It's still getting that. The other heads are now growing quicker, and they're getting a more novel training response. But it will maintain that. There's enough volume there to do that. All right. The other thing to think about. How long does it take to start losing muscle? Anybody know? If you've been training and you stop training completely, how long does it take before you lose any muscle mass at all? I'm not talking about glucose. We're not talking about intramuscular inflammation and a pump and stuff that you get. We're talking about muscle tissue. It doesn't start for at least 2 weeks. 2 weeks. Now, you are still growing up to that point. We're not detraining. So if you trained a muscle, it's growing for several days. You then don't train that muscle at all. It's going to take 2 weeks before the muscle you gain starts to disappear at all. And it's not going to be a lot. Okay? So if you have certain muscle that you're worried about from a certain exercise, certain head or something gets hit a way that's important to you, might I suggest you don't go more than 3 weeks without using it again. In other words, if you're rotating movements once every 1, 2, or 3 weeks, and you have a movement that you feel is so critical to you that you don't want to take it out. You don't want to take it out because it's so important. It's so unique to your goals and needs. It could be a glute ham raise, for example. Let's assume you don't have a hamstring curl. So that third head of the hamstring can't be fully worked from a hip hinge. Right? Only two of the heads can. One of the heads can't. Requires knee extension. Knee flexion, technically. Right? The only way we're really doing that under load is a glute ham raise of some type or a leg curl. And some leg curls suck at it, by the way. They're not all equal. So if you don't have that and you're doing the glute ham raise, but you're rotating hamstring movements, and it's important to you for some reason, why don't you just not go more than 3 weeks without it? So if you're changing every 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, make sure that by the third week again, you put it back in, right? Only 3 weeks without it. So you could be doing 3 week blocks. You could be doing 1 week, 2 week, whatever of a new exercise. Well, you could run 3 new exercises at 1 week blocks and then rotate it back in for a fourth. What happens? We re-stimulate all of that again with a good novel training response, right? So if you're worried about losing that at all, don't go cap it at 3 weeks. You could cap it even at 2. Right? You could run a different hamstring movement, like a hyperextension, right? Or a Romanian deadlift in that slot for 2 weeks. And then 2 weeks later, you come and work your glute ham raise back in. What's happened? You will have had zero chance of losing any of the muscle or even the performance on that movement. It shouldn't degrade. And you'll go back to making progress again. And this is only if we're trying to optimize. Let's keep in mind, this doesn't always happen. What do we mean? Sometimes this stuff returns instantly. For example, you guys have seen me get to very, very high levels of strength on the glute ham raise, lift we just talked about. You've also seen me take 6, 7 weeks off, 8 weeks off from doing it completely, or a month. What happens when I go back to it? Is my performance gone? No. Maybe the first workout I'm slightly weaker at it, but I'm still stronger than most lifters at the glute ham raise. Something people note. Pretty strong at those. I can go 5 weeks without doing it and come back and lose 1 or 2 reps. If there's a certain amount of resistance setting I can do 10 reps on, or 3 sets of 10, I can probably do 8 reps the first day I come back. The second workout I do it, I will be right back to 3 sets of 10. Possibly being able to make progress again, particularly if the muscle's gotten bigger from other movements. So even then, it's kind of overhyped that this is going to happen. Right? It can happen, but it's rare if you've built a real base on that movement, if you've gotten really good at it. And if you're really worried about it happening, don't leave that movement out more than 2 to 3 weeks. Then you have no chance of it. You're good. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.